Hi, thanks for joining me. So today I'm going to show you how to make one of these, a vertically polarized sleeve dipole antenna for your long range drone. This will work with either Crossfire or Express LRS, and it'll work for 915 megahertz or 868 megahertz. Just you need to use different lengths for your antenna measurements, and we'll get to that part. Vertical antennas meant to be used for long range drones. Typically meant when you have a diversity RX, you'll have a horizontal one somewhere on the drone tied to one of the arms or at the front or something, and then a vertical one like one of these in the back. So for a while I was using a barred pole with a UFL connector on it for my vertical antenna in the back. But now that I've got several drones that I bring when I go fly long range, I need to be able to take the antennas off them because I'm putting a couple of them in a case and stuff like that. And so I've switched to using something like this. There isn't really many good options for an antenna like this to buy for Express LRS or Crossfire. Some websites have the TBS tuned TX antenna. Now I know TrueRC does make a barred pole with an SMA connection on it. But in any case, I've opted for making my own sleeve dipole antenna rather than using the SMA barred pole anymore. So I've been using this for, probably for a couple of years now. This is what I've been using. Actually, I guess this one here is what I've been using for a couple of years. And yeah, I've been finding I've had pretty good results with it. I actually flew this drone. I had it specially set up with the Crossfire Nano Pro or whatever. So it's only got one antenna for the receiver. And I've flown now several kilometers out with this and gotten. All right, and the good thing about this is that these are really easy to make and they don't require much in the way of supplies. These are probably a bit longer than I needed. I think if you got an 18-inch, that would be fine, but these, I think these are 24-inch SMA extensions, so it's just SMA to SMA. And now what I'll do is just cut it in half and make two antennas out of it. And this is the base of our antenna where it screws on. And then we're going to use this along with some other parts to make the antenna out of. I got these SMA extensions from Amazon. And if you're going to order one, make sure you're getting one that uses RG316 for the cable. The other thing we're going to need is some various sizes of heat shrink, 3/16, 1/4 inch, and I'm not sure what size this is. It's bigger than a 16th, but yeah, something small. And then the only other thing we're going to need is some shielding like this to make the counter element on the antenna. So to get some shielding like this, but I just had some of this old audio cables sitting around from years ago. So I've just cut myself a chunk of that off, and I'm going to use this. So I'm just carefully cutting the insulator on the outside. Not even going all the way through, I'm just weakening it and hoping I'm going to be able to just tear it the rest of the way so that I don't risk cutting the shielding inside. All right, so that's how I got my shielded part for the counter element in this antenna. All right, so we'll start getting things cut to size here. So the finished antenna with the two elements together is going to be about 6 inches long. We want to have a little bit more length than that just to help get our antenna up in the air and get some better reception. The longer it is, the better it's going to be able to get a signal back to your transmitter. But also, the longer it is, the more vibrations it's going to cause and the more drag. So I think a good length is about somewhere between 7 and 8 inches. As I'm measuring mine, you can see from the top of the SMA connector there. And I'm going to go to 7.5 inches for mine. Now this main length for the cable doesn't matter for 915 or 868 yet. That only matters when we start sizing up the elements going onto the antenna. But I like to make two of them when I'm doing stuff like this, and I'll just use them both, and whichever one's the better one, that's the one I'm going to keep using. Especially with these, it's so easy to make too. It's not, it basically doesn't cost any more. You just buy the SMA extension, cut it in half, and then just find what you're going to use for your shielding. Whether you got some old audio cabling or video cabling around you can take this out of, or you have some RG 142 that you can buy from Amazon or whatever. We got to strip some of this now, but we cannot damage this little tiny wire in the very center. If we cut that little wire in the center, then this is basically no good. We have to throw it out and start with another one. So take your time cutting this. I don't know how much this shows up on the GoPro, but there's kind of a strong plastic insulator around the center pin. So it's pretty well protected. You just got to be careful. All right, so now the numbers that we need to work with for our element size is going to be 76 millimeters for 915 megahertz or 81 millimeters for 868 megahertz. I'm not 100% sure for 868. I haven't done any testing with that because I always use 915, but I believe it's going to be 81, possibly 82 millimeters is what's going to work best for 868. I'd say try 81 millimeters. So now to start, we need to remove the plastic protection and then this inside shielding. We will probably want to remove about 5 millimeters more than our number that we're using. So I'm doing a 915 megahertz, so my number is 76 millimeters. So I'm going to remove about 80 millimeters, maybe a little bit more. And then we're going to cut off just a little bit at the end to make it just perfect. I'm going to start with taking a little bit off here. Remember to be as careful as you can that you don't damage this inside insulator and wire. And as you get further down, start trying to practice seeing if you can get just the outside protection off without cutting this shield. Because when we get to the very bottom, we're going to want a little bit of this shield exposed. So now that I'm getting down to where my measurement is, I'm going to do this part gently and try not to damage the shielding underneath. I'm just going to cut the plastic outside. There we go. All right, we're going to make this a little bit easier to cut the shielding off here by just adding a little bit of solder to it. So I can see here I've got just over 80 millimeters stripped there. So now I'm going to add a little bit of solder to the shielding here, right where it meets the plastic insulator on the outside. All right, so we've already got half an antenna made here, sort of. That's the easy half though. So now we're going to put some heat shrink on here just to help stiffen this up. So the bottom 1.5 about of this is going to be just inert, like just length to it, and then the counter element's going to come down 3 inches to about here. So we're going to cover some of this with some extra heat shrink to help stiffen up that bottom part. Just stretching it a little tiny bit because it doesn't quite fit over that little piece of the SMA thing at the end here. I was saying there's about 1.5 inches of this that's inert at the bottom, and this is probably about 2 inches long. I wanted a little bit of this to come up past where the antenna sleeve is going to go onto here, and that's about 3 inches long. So it's going to start where this it's going to start right here at this part, and it's about 3 inches long. So yeah, I've got 5/8, almost 3/4 of it there. So I'm going to cut a little bit off so that I've got about a 1/2 inch coming into where my antenna sleeve is going to be. I'm also going to put a piece about a 1/2 inch long up at the very top here as well. Try not to damage the plastic insulation around here. So now we should feel up here where we did all this soldering. See, this is still sort of nice and wide there. It's not caving in or whatever. It's staying wide. And you can feel that heat shrink that we put in underneath. That's comes in for the first 1/2 inch here and helps keep this all wide and spread apart. And same thing with our other one down here. Now the reasoning behind all of this, adding up the heat shrink and keeping these things wide at the end, keeping this sleeve part wide at the ends, is this antenna works well like this, but if you do this, now it doesn't. Now it works really badly. But now you puff that back out again, and now it's a good long range antenna. So that's why we're adding all this heat shrink at the ends, because we want to keep this part away from causing interference to itself, getting too close to that inside shielding. Yeah, you can still get another piece of 1/8 on there, so I'm going to cut it so that it meets the end there, and now it's only going to go this far on because it's not going to be able to get it on. Oh, actually, maybe I can get it on there if I stretch the end of it again. And I'm also going to cut another 1/2 inch piece for the other end. I'm just, it doesn't have to be a 1/2 inch exactly. I'm just eyeballing it here. All right, let's see if I get this piece all the way down the end, if I bend it or stretch it open a little bit here. Oh, I should have done this one first. It's hard to get past that other one now. I did that in the wrong order. Oh, I just managed to squeeze it over it. So okay, so you want to do this one and then the one on the end, so you can get it past it. Oh, and that little bit of stretching made it work. I got it right to the end there. Yeah, it's just a tiny bit longer than my other one. I'm just going to trim that back a little bit. It's okay if it goes a little bit longer. I don't know. I'm just kind of a perfectionist. I want it to be 1/2 inch, so it's got to be 1/2 inch. If it's longer, it's not really going to matter. I want to just test and make sure that this 3/16 still fits over that. 3/16 still fits over everything there nicely. Okay, good. I don't know if that's going to show up on the GoPro there, but that's what it looks like now. Okay, so we're going to put that aside for a minute now. And now we need our piece of shielding that we're going to work with. So this is going to be the same length as these other parts. So for now, I'm just going to try to get a piece of this that's much longer than that ready, so that so the end falls apart and stuff, if it just, so I have some extra. Because right now this is a little bit thin, we're going to end up making this be thicker so that it'll fit around our 3/16 inch heat shrink. It all makes sense here in a second when I show you. I'm going to try to carefully get this heat shrink inside of there without getting any of these little wires caught in the heat shrink, because otherwise it'll push it back inside and start making it messy. Now at the end here where it doesn't fit, you just got to push on it. It's kind of like one of those little finger trap things. All right, there, I've got it over top of my heat shrink. So now I'm going to pull it all straight. All right, that looks pretty good. It's all nice and tight on the heat shrink, and it's held straight now. All right, so we're going to size up how long we want our heat shrink here. Actually, let's make sure this this, let's make sure the sleeve part of our antenna is going to be the right length still. So remember we wanted 81 millimeters, so I'm probably at like 86. All right, now we can size it up to here, because that's that part that comes past the very end of the heat shrink, right at the end, it lines up with this part of the shielding that's exposed here, because those are going to get soldered together. All right, so I can see I'm going to cut my heat shrink here now down just a little bit. Yep, that's going to end just right. So now before I do this, I'm going to get another piece of this 3/16. Now I can really double check my lengths here. Holding this up there, matched up to the bottom. So now my other piece of 3/16 here, it's going to go like that, and it'll be just about 1/2 inch into where this is going to be. So that's perfect. Because yeah, we're going to add even more, a little bit more heat shrink here. This is the 3/16 now, so it should fit over all this nicely. Well, that's pretty tight there, but I think if we stretch the end of this other one, we'll be able to get it over top of this one. Even though this was a little bit of a tight fit now already, but having this bottom part nice and stiff is going to help. And we also want to try to have a little bit of build up here over the last 1/2 inch where this goes on. It's hard to explain in advance, but you'll see here if you watch the video a second time, then it'll all kind of make sense since after you've watched the end part. I'm going to put another piece of this 3/16 up here at the end on this side. Okay. That's it. Now we're ready to get this thing on. Like I was saying, now we're going to have to stretch it here a little bit. It was kind of a tight fit over the other piece. So I'm just putting it over the end of my snippers there and opening them and widening out the end, like fluting it a little bit. That should fit over everything now. I'd fit over all that, no problem. And I can feel that thicker part that we've built up with the heat shrink goes about 1/2 inch past the end of the this sleeve element here, so that's perfect. All right, so now the idea is that when we bend in these wires from the shielding here, so that they'll meet up with the wires from the shielding on the inside, and that looks like that's all going to work out. I don't know if it's going to really protect it while we're doing this other part, but it's not going to hurt it to have it there ahead of time. And just a quick bit of soldering here to get these two ground shields attached together. It's not the easiest soldering to do, but I've just kind of get some solder laid around there on this outer one. Then what I do is go and just fine tune it with the soldering iron afterwards. Just get a little extra on the tip of the soldering iron and go in and sort of spin it slowly and make sure it's all getting caught there. The GoPro battery ran out on me there. So my 1/4 inch heat shrink still just fits over top of all this nicely. So I'm going to cut a piece. Yeah, this is going to be about 5.5 inches long. I'm also going to just keep trying to stiffen things up here. So I'm adding a piece of 1/8 right here at the end. Or not at the end, at the center point. So this is about 1 3/4 inches long. doesn't have to be exactly this size. It's just, again, like I'm saying, going towards helping to stiffen everything up. So now we should feel up here where we did all this soldering. See, this is still sort of nice and wide there. It's not caving in or whatever. It's staying wide. And you can feel that heat shrink that we put in underneath. That's comes in for the first ½ inch here and helps keep this all wide and spread apart. And same thing with our other one down here. Now the reasoning behind all of this, adding up the heat shrink and keeping these things wide at the end, keeping this sleeve part wide at the ends, is this antenna works well like this, but if you do this, now it doesn't. Now it works really badly. But now you puff that back out again, and now it's a good long range antenna. So that's why we're adding all this heat shrink at the ends, because we want to keep this part away from causing interference to itself, getting too close to that inside shielding. I'm not sure if this, let's see if this 3/16 will shrink down enough to stay on here or not. But now this long piece of 1/4 inch is going to go over the whole thing. And that'll help hold all of this in place and keep it from fraying anymore and stuff. It's going all the way down to the end. And I should be able to feel where the thick part there is inside where I did the soldering. So I'm going to shrink it only as far down as where that thick part starts. Now we just can find that thick part. We know that was a ½ inch up from the end. So let's just go down a little bit more and shrink it only to there. That's it. And it's finished. That's a perfectly good long range antenna for your Express LRS or Crossfire. And my advice would be to use one of these vertically in the back and an Immortal T horizontally polarized, tied to one of the arms, zip tied to one of the arms, or at the front of the quad mounted somehow, something like that. But there you go, that's it. I've flown many a kilometer out using one of these. All right, well, if you have any questions about how to make your own, just leave them below in the comments and I'll make sure to answer them all. All right, well, that's all for this one. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.